that kind of post, given that they had just been through one of the most traumatic experiences of their lifetime? Their building under lockdown because there was an armed gunman firing at them and killing a police officer. Did you consider how they would react?
And Senator Blumenthal, I'm under oath. And the truth is, no, I didn't. I had to go feed the horses, take care of the farm. My wife put together the memes. I looked through them and I said, go ahead and post it. Now, in terms of the traumatization of CDC members, they live in Atlanta. I used to live in North Atlanta. Gunfire is normal in Atlanta. It happens all the time.
Don't you regret those posts?
I don't.
I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Probably wouldn't have even noticed if you wouldn't have blown it out of proportion. But anyway, the record for this hearing remain open for 15 days until Wednesday, September 24th, 2025 at 5 p.m. for the submission of statements. I want to welcome everyone to today's hearing titled, quote, How the Corruption of Science Has Impacted Public Perception and Policy Regarding Vaccines. I also want to thank the witnesses for their time, effort, and willingness to testify. The awareness that much of scientific research is unreliable is not new. In an article published in January 2009 entitled, quote, Drug Companies and Doctors, A Story of Corruption, Dr. Marcia Angel stated, quote, It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reach slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as, and here's the real jaw-dropping part of this, over my 2 decades as editor of the New England Journal. John Johnson making that quote. That is an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. A May 2016 survey published in the journal Nature found that, quote, more than 70% of researchers have tried and failed to reproduce another scientist's experiments, unquote. And in May 2024, Wiley, a major academic publisher, closed 19 journals primarily due to issues with fraudulent papers, largely attributed to paper mills producing fake or compromised studies. In the 2 years leading up to May 2024, Wiley had retracted more than 11,300 papers that were deemed compromised, often due to manipulated peer review process or fabricated content. I've invited 2 witnesses who will discuss different examples of how research can be doctored or withheld in order to support a predetermined narrative and support the powerful interests that benefit from that narrative. Attorney Aaron Siri will unveil a high-quality study completed in 2020 and suspiciously withheld by the authors that shows vaccinated children suffer 2.5 times the rate of chronic illness compared to unvaccinated children. PhD researcher Dr. Toby Rogers will discuss the history and obvious flaws in studies searching for the cause of autism. Minorities witness, Dr. Jake Scott, will make the case to the public on research proving that vaccines are safe and effective. Concurring with our first hearing, we released a report showing federal health agencies were aware that a safety signal did exist for myocarditis associated with the mRNA injection and hid that fact from the public. Our second hearing allowed witnesses who have been impacted by vaccine injuries and fatal infectious diseases to tell their stories. The news media is all too willing to highlight a new outbreak of an infectious disease, but is loath to broadcast what they generally describe as, quote, rare and mild, unquote, vaccine injuries. As a result, the vaccine injured have been ignored and abandoned. In September 2024, I held a public roundtable discussion titled American Health and Nutrition that highlighted America's alarming rate of chronic illness. Dr. Chris Palmer, a psychiatrist who studies the impact, testified that when it comes to chronic illness, quote, they do not want root causes to be discovered, unquote. By they, I assume Dr. Palmer was referring to the powerful entities and individuals whose multi-billion-dollar businesses and organizational interests would be disrupted by the knowledge that the products they produce or promote could cause harm. They certainly don't want the public to know the root cause if it's one of their products, and they're willing to by spending billions of dollars on advertising and lobbyists to keep the public from even asking the question, much less finding the answer. The purpose of these hearings is to force the acknowledgement of reality. Exactly what all the realities and truths are, I cannot say. What I can say for sure is that we have been lied to repeatedly, and that in order to restore public faith in federal agencies, integrity must also have open minds and be willing to face the truth. It's been interesting to see the media's reaction to our previous hearings. Except for a few highly biased attack pieces, the legacy media has largely ignored what I consider to be highly informative hearings. Perhaps they're taking advice from Senator Blumenthal, who hours before our last hearing, Voices of the Vaccine Injured held a press conference and was reported to have stated, quote, "I hope nothing comes of this hearing. I hope people don't pay attention because it isn't deserving of credibility and attention." However, during that hearing, Senator Blumenthal stated, quote, "I am heartbroken to hear these stories. It makes me want to do something," unquote. So maybe hearing true, incredible stories of vaccine injuries actually did deserve attention. I certainly believe today's testimony deserves attention and hope it will prompt us to do something to restore credibility and integrity to science and our federal health agencies. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to everyone. Whether you agree or disagree, this hearing is not personal between Senator Johnson or myself, between any of you and the witnesses. This hearing is about, quote unquote, the corruption of science. And I agree. We are witnessing the corruption of science. It's happening before our eyes in real time. Maybe more accurately, it should be entitled The Denial and Degrading of Science. When the Senate-confirmed director of the CDC is fired because she refuses to fire officials or approve unscientific vaccine guidance without evidence, that is corruption of science. When the indisputable determination that greenhouse gases pose a threat to human health is rescinded, and clean energy projects are canceled in favor of pollution-heavy coal, that is corruption of science. When the CDC's measles risk forecast is suppressed in the middle of the worst measles outbreak in decades, that is corruption of science. Overriding ongoing corruption of science is to deny or spawn doubt about safe vaccines that discourages people from making use of them to save lives and keep our kids healthy. The Trump administration's corruption of science is unprecedented in our country's history. Our committee has analyzed the ways in which the Trump administration has interfered with science in just the first 8 months and found 57 separate, discrete instances of corruption of science. And if there's no objection, I'd like this staff memorandum to be entered into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Since President Trump took office in January, Secretary Kennedy and other administration officials have silenced scientists, halted research, crippled our public health infrastructure, and politicized institutions that were once renowned around the world for adherence to nonpartisan, science-based recommendations. And they've also demonized vaccines and taken steps that will make it harder for Americans to access them, depriving Americans of basic public health tools. Less than 2 weeks ago, President Trump fired CDC Director Susan Mares, barely a month after she was confirmed by this body, the United States Senate, because she refused to go with Secretary Kennedy's demands about changing vaccination policy. This administration not only wants to consult people who will tell it what it wants to hear, but it denies others who have accurate, fact-based words that should be heard. That is not science. It is zealotry. It is an obsessive facts and a adherence to conspiracy theories over science. Secretary Kennedy is creating a public health system that puts allegiance to his dogma over health and safety. Just last week, more than 1,000 present and former HHS employees wrote an open letter calling for him to step down, stating that he is, quote, endangering the nation's health by spreading inaccurate health information. End quote. Without objection, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter that letter into the record.
Without objection.
I certainly concur with their conclusion. A charlatan like RFK Jr. has no place in the government or anywhere else near public health. I am deeply fearful of the consequences for our country if he remains in charge, and unscientific rhetoric, corruption of science, continue to rule the day and perpetuated by people in leadership positions. So I have some questions. How many preventable diseases will become out of control because people cannot or will be discouraged from getting vaccines? How many advances in science and medicine will we miss out on because the NIH is cut in funding and research is impeded? How many public health workers will lose their jobs? Public health workers who could save lives and health. I deeply fear for the future of public health in this country because of the corruption of science. On August 8th, the gunman fired nearly 200 rounds of ammunition into the CDC's headquarters in Atlanta, allegedly over his anger about the COVID-19 vaccine. One heroic police officer tragically lost his life. Dr. Robert Malone, one of the new members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization, or ACIP, appointed by Secretary Kennedy after he fired all of the sitting members, made multiple statements that appear to threaten violence against scientists and public officials before and after that shooting. This is an image that Dr. Malone, this image, just hours before the shooting, a revolver loaded with a single bullet and the words, quote, 5 out of 6 scientists have proven that Russian roulette is harmless. This was apparently not enough for Dr. Malone because less than 48 hours after the shooting had occurred, he posted several other violent images, including one apparently threatening politicians, and one seen here with an image of an automatic weapon with the words, quote, the Second Amendment was not written in case the deer turned against us. I wrote to Secretary Kennedy in the wake of these posts and demanded that he fire Dr. Malone. I would like my letter of August 13th to Secretary Kennedy be entered in the record if there's no objection.
Without objection.
Chairman Johnson, I would ask you to join me in my demand that Dr. Malone be fired. Violence and violent rhetoric should not be tolerated. That is corruption of science. Rhetoric has consequences. Misinformation has consequences. And the failure to respect real science will deprive all Americans of treatments and cures. And before my time is up, Mr. Chairman, I want to acknowledge the study that will be discussed by the majority at this hearing. Citing the fact that one deeply flawed study was not published as evidence cover-up ignores the thousands of others contradicting its findings. In fact, as you probably know, there have been 3,000 published studies of vaccines, 1,000 since 2020, showing vaccines are safe and effective. The estimate is that thousands of lives have been saved by vaccines and illnesses prevented. I'm looking forward to hearing from Dr. Jake Scott, an infectious disease specialist from Stanford, by the way, the only doctor on this panel, and why no reputable journal would or should publish that study. It pains me, frankly, it pains me that unscientific studies like this one are being promoted in this committee purporting to be scientific fact. And I fear that this kind of hearing will only undermine our already shaken public health system. But in the meantime, I want to thank all of the public health workers at the federal and state level who continue to do your job day in and day out, despite the discouraging atmosphere here in Washington, and in some cases, despite these kinds of intolerable threats that should merit the firing of Dr. Malone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think you see there's a slight difference of opinion here on the panel. I would ask that we enter into the record the study Impact of Childhood Vaccination on Short and Long-Term Chronic Health Outcomes in Children, a both birth cohort study by the Henry Ford Health System in Detroit, Michigan. Ask that be entered in the record without objection. I would also ask that we actually have Dr. Malone in the audience today, and we'll see whether what opportunity we afford him to defend himself. But in the meantime, I would ask that his basically resume, his CV, be entered in the record as well, because Senator Blumenthal has termed him unqualified for the position, which I completely disagree with. Here's his CV. You might even take a copy. It is the tradition of this committee to swear in witnesses, so we all three rise and raise your right hand. Testimony you give before this This ought to be an interesting discussion. Before we turn to the witnesses, in preparation for this hearing, I became aware of the fact that a full-length documentary is being prepared, basically talking about how this study was proposed, how it was conducted. I asked the producers of that. It's produced by the Informed Consent Action Network. Mr. Sirius represents that organization. And I asked ICANN to put together a 5-minute video representative of what they're going to be discussing as they tell the story of this withheld study. So can we run that video now?
Children struggling every day with ADHD? Scott's allergies made it hard to keep up with his friends.
Allergic reactions from accidental food exposure.
Moderate to severe eczema. Plaque psoriasis. Rheumatoid arthritis.
Food allergies.
Allergy syndrome. The health of American children is in crisis.
More than 40% of American children now have at least one chronic health condition.
Autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile diabetes, lupus, Crohn's disease, all this IBS.
Just a few decades ago, 1 in 10,000 children had autism. Today it's 1 in 31.
ADD, ADHD, speech and language, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, sleep disorders.
There's no way in the world these kind of rapid increases in the incidence of disease could be genetic. Genetic change takes generations, centuries to play out.
What the heck is happening?
What is happening? Chronic disease has gone from 12.8% in our children in the 1980s to over 54% of our kids now. That's the greatest decline in human health that's ever been recorded. And people will say, how do you know it's not the pesticides sprayed all over our crops or the hormones in our beef or plastics or forever chemicals? But when we're talking about an autoimmune disease crisis, which is what's happening in America, shouldn't we look closest at the one product that's designed to alter our immune system for life? And we don't just inject it 1 time or 2 times or 10 times or 15 times or 20 times or 50 times. 72 times we are altering the immune system for our children with our vaccine program. There'd be one easy study to rule it out, compare vaccinated children to completely unvaccinated children. But we don't know because they've never done the study.
It's the CDC's responsibility to do those studies, and they've been ordered again and again and again to do them, and they have refused.
This is information that vaccine safety advocates want, and I'm not sure why it hasn't been done.
What we would need is a science trust.
There would have to be a passionately pro-vaccine, highly accredited group of scientists willing to do a super robust, retrospective, vaccinated versus unvaccinated comparative study.
As fate would have it, Del met the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health System, Mark Zervos.
Dr. Zervos is the perfect epidemiologist for the study. He's incredibly pro-vaccine, and he's also used to being in high-profile cases because he was at the center of the Flint, Michigan water investigation. Dr. Zervos only agreed to do this study to prove us wrong.
Del and I thought that was an excellent opportunity.
We only had one request.
Whatever the outcome, you publish it. He said, whatever the results, they get published. Would he stick to that promise if the results show that unvaccinated kids are healthier?
649-10-4.
Impact of childhood vaccination on short and long-term chronic health outcomes in children. A birth cohort study. I've never seen this study before.
18,468 subjects.
Henry Ford, like other institutions, has a bias towards the goodness of vaccines. If the results came back demonstrating that the battery of vaccines was associated with this, such a result would be particularly convincing. This could be essentially one of the most valuable studies in the field.
The vaccinated subjects were over 4 times more likely to have an asthma diagnosis.
600% more acute and chronic ear infections.
4.47 times the amount of speech disorders in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated.
5.5 times risk.
616% learning issues, developmental delays, speech delays, language delays.
Amongst the unvaccinated group, there were 0.
There was 0 brain dysfunction, 0 diabetes, 0 behavioral problems, 0 learning disabilities, 0 intellectual disabilities, 0 tics, and 0 other psychological disabilities. None.
It's a big difference.
Very important this study sees the light of day.
This is devastating.
This paper should have been rushed to publication on an emergency.
They're systematically making kids sick.
This may be the most important study that has ever been done, and it needs to be published.
He knows if he puts his name on this, his career is over.
I know, honestly, really emotional.
Zervo's probably going to lose his job over this.
Our first witness is Mr. Aaron Siri. Mr. Siri is a managing partner of Siri and Glimstad with over 85 professionals. He's handled numerous high-profile cases involving challenges to medical mandates, restoring exemptions, agency transparency, including forcing FDA to release the COVID-19 vaccine licensure documents and deposing immunologists, infectious disease doctors, and vaccinologists. Mr. Siri.
Thank you, Senator. Leading up to 2013, the Institute of Medicine was commissioned by the United States Department of Health and Human Services to review the entire body of existing scientific literature to assess the safety of the CDC's childhood schedule as a whole. HHS has paid the IOM to do that. After the IOM engaged in that task with a panel of multidisciplinary scientists, it concluded, quote, "The studies designed to examine the long-term effects of the cumulative number of vaccines or other aspects of the immunization schedule have not been conducted." Have not been conducted, end quote. That's the Institute of Medicine's finding after reviewing the entire body of scientific literature. Meaning the IOM could not find studies comparing, as you would do to study the safety of a product, an exposed group, meaning kids that got vaccines, the childhood schedule, with unvaccinated children, kids who got no vaccines, which is what you would need to assess the safety of the schedule. Lacking evidence safety, the best the IOM can conclude was, quote, There is no evidence that the schedule is not safe, end quote. This, of course, also means the IOM cannot find evidence to conclude that the schedule is safe. The IOM report did say it is, quote, possible to make the comparison, meaning through vaccinated and unvaccinated children, through analyses of patient information contained in large databases such as the Vaccine Safety Data Link, end quote, which used to be housed at the CDC. But to date, the government has still not conducted this comparison. By the way, the CDC published a white paper in 2015 on how to do that study. Has it been done? I don't know. Has it been published? No. In 2017, one of our clients, Senator Johnson said earlier, the Informed Consent Action Network, wanted to see this exact study of comparing vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. As the trailer you just watched noted, Del Bigtree, ICANN's CEO, had met Dr. Marcus Service at one point, who was the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Medical Center. And he agreed to meet and to potentially do the study. He is conducts clinical trials for vaccines, including for the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. He's avowedly pro-vaccine. And when we met him, we argued that this was an opportunity to shut the anti-vaxxers up about their claim that unvaccinated children are healthier. To our surprise, Dr. Zerva said he would conduct the study. He recruited a chief epidemiologist and 2 statisticians within Henry Ford to do so. These were mainstream scientists who no doubt held orthodox views regarding vaccines. In early 2020, I received a copy of the study. It showed the results of the analysis comparing children enrolled in Henry Ford from 2000 to 2016 from birth onward who had no vaccines compared to those who had 1 or more vaccine medical records. Meaning, finally, a large vaccinated versus unvaccinated study using health data from a major United States health institution, something, as the IOM pointed out, never existed before. The study began by explaining it set out to reduce vaccine hesitancy by assuring parents the CDC vaccine schedule is safe. Instead, what these researchers found was that vaccinated children had 4 times the rate of atopic disease, 5.96 times the rate of autoimmune disease, and 5.53 times the rate of neurodevelopmental disorders, which included 3.28 times the rate of developmental delay and 4.47 times the rate of speech disorder. All of these findings were statistically significant. There was also other conditions for which there were numerous cases in the vaccinated group, but 0 in the unvaccinated group. Hence, a rate cannot be calculated, including brain dysfunction, ADHD, learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and tics. For example, there were 262 cases of ADHD in the vaccinated group, and there were none in the unvaccinated group. In this study, there were around 16,000 kids in the vaccinated group, by the way, around 2,000 in the unvaccinated group. So the rate, of course, between those is important, and that's what the study compared. These findings were troubling, including because these chronic health issues can be caused by immune system dysregulation, and vaccines can cause immune system dysregulation. So, written submission. Overall, the study found that after 10 years, 17% of the unvaccinated children had a chronic health issue, while 57% of the vaccinated children had at least one chronic health issue, often multiple. That's 17 versus 57%. The only real problem with this study and why it didn't get submitted for publication is that its findings did not fit the belief and the policy that vaccines are safe. Had it found children were healthier, it no doubt would have been published immediately. But because it found the opposite, it was shoved in a drawer. We have repeatedly urged Dr. Zervos and Lamoretta to submit the study for publication. They have affirmed the study was well designed and conducted, but Dr. Zervos has said he doesn't want to lose his job. And Dr. Lamoretta has said she does not want to make doctors uncomfortable. This is a real-world example of how the science around vaccines gets corrupted. How only studies that confirm the beliefs and policies that vaccines are safe get published. Everything else gets shoved in the drawer. This selection bias is dangerous and results in corrupting all the science concerning vaccine safety. We can protect children from infectious disease, and we can protect children from vaccine harms. We should and we must do both.
Thank you, Mr. Siri. Our next witness is Dr. Toby Rogers. Dr. Rogers is a fellow at the Brownstone Institute for Social and Economic Research. He has a PhD in political economy from the University of Sydney and a master in public policy from UC Berkeley. His research focuses on regulatory capture and corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. Mr. Roberts.
Good afternoon, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the Permanent Subcommittee. On July 4th, 2015, my then partner's son was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. I was in a PhD program in political economy at the University of Sydney, where I had access to almost all current scientific and medical journals. I wanted to better understand what was happening, so I went to the CDC's webpage on the causes of autism. As a PhD student, I was trained to focus on primary source documents. So I read all the references in their footnotes. To my surprise, I quickly discovered the CDC's narrative did not add up. Claims that autism is genetic don't make sense because autism prevalence was rising too fast. There's no such thing as a genetic epidemic. Then the CDC blamed valproic acid, a treatment for epilepsy that is contraindicated in pregnancy, and thalidomide, which was never approved for use in the United States. Finally, the CDC pointed to advanced parental age, but the odds ratios were modest, and the increase in the proportion of older parents is insufficient to explain autism prevalence. Furthermore, the cost of autism was already in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year in the U.S., and yet government was not responding with a sense of urgency. I changed my doctoral thesis topic to the political economy of autism, and spent the next 4 years reading and analyzing nearly everything that's been written on autism prevalence, causation, and cost. In 2019, my thesis passed rigorous external peer review. It's now in the top 10 of the most downloaded doctoral research papers in the history of the University of Sydney. Since then, I've continued my research with Children's Health Defense, as an independent journalist, and as a fellow at Brownstone Institute. Here are the facts. In 1970, the first autism prevalence study in the U.S. found an autism rate of less than 1 in 10,000 children. According to a study by the EPA, sometime around 1987, the autism rate in the U.S. began to skyrocket. The most recent report from the CDC showed that 1 in 31 8-year-old children in the U.S. in 2022 were on the autism spectrum. That's a 32,158% increase in the last 52 years. 2 massive studies from the best epidemiologists in California show that changes in diagnostic criteria only explain a small fraction of the rise in autism prevalence. There are 22 studies that claim that vaccines don't cause autism, have a completely unvaccinated control group. So unfortunately, if you want to understand what's causing the autism epidemic, these studies are of no use. Then there are 5 large genetic research projects: Agree, SSC, ASC, Missing, and Spark. Together, they've produced 501 published papers. The search for the gene for autism has consumed over $2.3 billion, and researchers have almost nothing to show for it because genes don't suddenly create epidemics. The human genome just doesn't change that fast. Then there are 4 large epigenetic research projects, so genes in the environment: Charge, Marbles, Seed, and Early. Combined, they've produced 437 publications that look at the effects of air pollution, pesticides, fluorinated substances, PCBs, nutritional factors, flame retardants, maternal metabolic conditions, and volatile organic compounds. None of these studies control for vaccines is impossible, so it's impossible to know the true impact of these variables. The critical missing piece in autism research is vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies. Thankfully, there are now 6 good studies that we can rely on. Unfortunately, these studies have been systematically suppressed and ignored by the mainstream media and the medical establishment. 2 studies by Gallagher and Goodman show that the birth dose of the hepatitis B vaccine significantly increases autism risk. 3 studies by Anthony Mawson confirm that vaccination increases the odds of developing autism by at least 4.2-fold. Preterm birth, coupled with vaccination, increases the odds of neurodevelopmental disability by more than 12-fold compared to preterm birth without vaccination. And finally, a study by Hooker and Miller published in 2021 found that vaccination increases autism risk 5-fold. Vaccination in the absence of breastfeeding increases autism 12.5-fold. Vaccination in addition to C-section birth increases autism risk 18.7-fold. After conducting this systematic review of 1,000 studies, my belief is that the autism and chronic disease epidemics are primarily caused by toxicants, mostly from vaccines and about a dozen additional toxicants. If we stop exposing children to these hazards in the first place, that would stop the epidemics of chronic illness in children. Now we must summon the political will to act. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Our final witness is Dr. Jake Scott. Dr. Scott is a board-certified infectious disease physician and clinical associate professor at Stanford University School of Medicine. He attended the University of Vermont College of Medicine. He currently provides inpatient and outpatient care for general infectious diseases. Dr. Scott.
Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the subcommittee, thank you sincerely for the opportunity to testify. It is a true privilege here. My name is Jake Scott, and I'm an infectious diseases physician at Stanford. I've spent my career treating patients and evaluating medical evidence with a focus on vaccine safety and efficacy. I have no financial conflicts of interest. My vaccine research is either self-funded or supported by Stanford University. Since April, I've co-led an international team building what we believe is the most comprehensive database of vaccine trials ever assembled. We set out to answer a fundamental question. What does the complete trial record actually show about vaccine testing? We've cataloged 1,088 randomized control trials from 1941 to 2025, involving over 10.5 million participants. Every entry is publicly verifiable through PubMed links. The entire database is openly accessible. Anyone with internet access can verify our findings. This is what transparency looks like. Our findings directly refute false claims about vaccine testing. We documented 661 trials using inert placebo controls with saline, sterile water, or other biologically inactive substances. Of these, 503 involved antigens that routine childhood vaccines are based on. Most importantly, we confirmed that all 16 antigens routinely have been studied in placebo-controlled trials. Every single one. The claim that childhood vaccines haven't been tested against placebos is demonstrably false. I'm also a senior researcher on a systematic review analyzing respiratory virus immunizations published over the last 2 years. 590 studies from over 17,000 identified references that we screened through the Vaccine Integrity Project. Our safety monitoring systems work. They detected intussusception with RotaShield in 1 in 10,000. The vaccine was withdrawn. They caught Johnson & Johnson blood clots at 3 per million. When early myocarditis reports emerged, CDC proactively alerted clinicians to enhance surveillance before the signal was confirmed. Within weeks, the risk was quantified, communicated, and incorporated into guidance. These systems detect events as rare as 1 in a million doses. The unpublished Henry Ford analysis being presented today is fundamentally flawed by design. Unlike our publicly accessible database, this study remained hidden from peer review after 5 years. The core problem, vaccinated children had twice the follow-up time, substantially more healthcare visits than unvaccinated children. When diagnoses require doctor visits, children seeing doctors more often inevitably have more recorded conditions. This is classic detection bias that inflates risk estimates without reflecting true health differences. The study reports 0 ADHD cases among thousands of unvaccinated children. How is that possible? With a national prevalence at 11%, that's highly unlikely unless conditions went undiagnosed. They claimed 6 to 8-fold increase in ear infections. That lacks biological plausibility, but it's fully consistent with differential healthcare utilization. The study found no association with autism, an adjusted hazard ratio of 0.62, yet the authors emphasize selected findings while disregarding this null result for the very condition many claim vaccines cause. How do you explain that? What does rigorous published research show? A Danish study of 1.2 million children found no association between aluminum exposure from vaccines and 50 different chronic conditions. Meta-analyses encompassing millions of children consistently find no link between vaccines and autism. Throughout my career, I've treated countless patients with vaccine-preventable diseases. During COVID, I lost unvaccinated patients who would have survived with vaccination. These realities coexist. Vaccines can cause rare adverse events, and they do, and they prevent vastly more death and disability. Worst outbreak in decades, 1,431 cases and 3 deaths in 2025. No kid should die from measles. The choice before this committee is clear. Base public health policy on transparent, peer-reviewed evidence that anyone can verify, or on an unpublished analysis with acknowledged fatal biases hidden from scientific scrutiny. Vaccines have saved 4 million lives globally over 50 years. The data are public. The evidence is overwhelming. Parents deserve policies grounded in this evidence. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. I'll start with the questioning. I'll just basically turn it over to Mr. Siri. Do you want to start with the 154 million claim? But we had the Lanky member, and we also had Dr. Scott say that the Henry Ford study was highly flawed by design. Do you want to maybe start there and defend the Henry Ford study?
Whatever you would like, Senator, I'm happy to do that, yes. Thank you. Happy to start wherever you'd like. In terms of the Henry Ford study, I appreciate Dr. Scott's comment, but I don't believe Dr. Scott has actually read my submission, given his comments about what he believes makes this study fatally flawed. He points to one thing. He calls it detection bias. Because what he's saying is that the vaccinated children are more likely to seek medical care than the unvaccinated children. Had he read my submission, he would have seen that the study authors who were looking to validate the safety of these vaccines specifically conducted sensitivity analysis to see whether there was detection bias. How did they do that? What they did is they looked at the average number of times that the vaccinated cohort sought medical care versus the unvaccinated. And what they found was vaccinated children sought medical care on average 7 times a year. Unvaccinated sought it twice a year, which would make sense if you have less illness. But for the unvaccinated kids, those 17% that had a chronic health issue, they sought medical care on average 5 times, which reflects that when an unvaccinated child had a medical doctor. Number 2, as the study points out, the type of health conditions that we saw in the unvaccinated population are not ones you wouldn't see medical care from. If your child has a serious medical condition, you're going to your doctor. You're going to the medical system. That's not me saying it. That's what these study authors pointed out. Also, to further validate their findings, they even reran their study to remove any child that didn't seek any medical care. So essentially, they removed the healthiest unvaccinated children, another sensitivity analysis they did, and they still found the statistically significant outcome that I discussed earlier. Now, the other thing they did to make sure that their results were valid, and again, I assume they did this because they wanted to do exactly what Dr. Scott is saying. Well, there's got to be a mistake here. It can't be that this is true. And so the other thing that they did is they conducted a sensitivity analysis whereby they removed any children from the study that weren't in the Henry Ford system from birth onward for at least 5 years, thinking, okay, well, maybe we, got it wrong because the unvaccinated kids, had an average duration of less time. But by doing that, we're only going to look at kids who were in there for at least 5 years. And what they found was, consistent with the findings, affirming the findings, the risk ratio of chronic disease amongst the vaccinated went up, not down. They also did that sensitivity analysis at 3 years and at 1 year. And each time they still found the vaccinated children a statistically significant increased rate of chronic health. They used cancer as a control, assuming, well, there's no reason vaccines should cause cancer, and they didn't find a statistically significant outcome. So the issue that Dr. Scott points to in a study, which, by the way, he's labeling fundamentally flawed, there was enough information in my submission to have understood what I just said.
He actually said it was flawed by design. You know the study authors of this thing, that the people who believe these are professionals that would design a study by design to make it flawed, to give a result that vaccinated children suffered chronic illness 2.5 times. I mean, that's basically what Dr. Scott is saying to the authors of this Henry Ford study.
I mean, I think from the perspective of the establishment, this study is flawed because it's actually designed to detect safety. It's actually designed to reach a conclusion on safety. That's what makes it flawed. You know, it's not like the aluminum study that Dr. Scott pointed to, which he called, rigorous.
Let me, so you can get down in the weeds very quickly, and you have to, quite honestly.
Yes.
This is true. But let's pull it back a little bit. I heard for the first time during the RFK Jr. hearing that there's been a study that vaccines have saved 154 million lives. You have a somewhat interesting take on that. Do you want to talk a bit about that scientific gem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the claim about 154 million lives saved is it actually is the epitome of corruption of science. It reflects the corruption of science in action. While this Henry Ford study, for example, is based on actual data, medical records, the immunization registry, and look carefully at it, this study is just based on guesswork and assumptions. It is published by the WHO. It is essentially an advertising piece by them for how effective their immunization program has been over the last 50 years. And they claim there's 154 million lives saved. But when you look at the study, unlike the Henry Ford study, it has no confidence intervals. So what is the confidence interval of that 154 million claim? What is the reliability range of it? It doesn't have one. You know why it doesn't have one? Because it's totally unreliable. As buried in page 42 of the supplement to that quote-unquote advertising piece by the WHO, it's set in a section entitled Uncertainty of Estimates, it says that, quote, it cannot put, quote, bounds around the veracity of the estimates. It can't put bounds around the veracity of the estimates. And that, quote, any bounds are arbitrary, end quote, and that, quote, it should not be interpreted as a claim to where the edges of valid estimates possibly lie, end quote. What that means is it could be equal to 200 million lives were lost because of the vaccine program. It's an unbounded estimate. That is the corruption of science, to rely on that. And it gets worse from there because, and when you actually look at the hard data, the number makes no sense. Almost the entirety of that 154 million lives saved comes down to 2 vaccines, DTP and measles. Well, as laid out thoroughly in my submission, the studies that look at DTP vaccine show that it causes more mortality, far more mortality, than lives saved. While it may reduce deaths from diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, the studies show numerous rate the kids. The seminal study showed that the kids who got DTP died at 10 times the rate, 10 times the rate, than kids who did not get that vaccine. And that is, I'll give a number, it's 5360569. That study is not just one study sitting on its own. It comes after a long series of studies. It was published in 2017, and then another one in 2018. And DTP is the most commonly used vaccine in the world. That's what the science, based on hard data, that has confidence intervals, shows. Not this WHO advertising report with no confidence intervals. The other vaccine that accounts for almost the entirety of the 154 million lives saved is the measles vaccine. The study assumes, I guess to its credit, that 60% of that decline was from other factors, and 40% of the decline in measles mortality was from the vaccine. But here's the thing. When you look at the decline in measles mortality in other countries when there were no vaccines, like the US,
between 1900 and the first vaccine in 1963, measles mortality declined by 99%. That's CDC data, not assumption. When you look at the UK data, between 1900 and 1968, when they first started the first measles vaccine there, measles mortality there declined by 99%. So when you overlay that number, not use a 40% decline, but 99%, and then you add in the increased deaths from DTP, you're upside down already. That's why they can't put a bound on their $154 million lives claim. Those vaccines cost a lot more than $154 million.
Let me give Senator Marino a chance.
May I ask one last point on this, and I'll stop. I'm sorry. And it's this. As I've laid out in my submission, study after study after study shows that people who get measles vaccine die at far less lower rates from heart disease and from various cancers. It's not me saying that. I'm just a lawyer, as Senator Blumenthal pointed out, okay? But that's what the studies show, and they're consistent. They're an inconvenient truth when it comes to the medical establishment. When you add in that data as well, it's really upside down. I lay that out, including a 100,000-person, 20-year prospective study in Japan that found that those who got measles and mumps, about 7% were dead from heart disease after about 20 years, whereas those who didn't get measles and mumps, around 14% of them were dead after 20 years. Heart disease is the #1 killer of folks in the United States. I'll stop there.
We'll continue. Senator Marino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. Thank you all for caring about this issue and being here. Mr. Chairman, I was going to write my first question actually to the ranking member, but he's not here. So I just want to pause for a second, because there's a lot of things that I've seen in my first 8 months here in elected office that happens. It's a little crazy. So I just want us to reflect on something the ranking member said. He said that a person should be fired for exercising their First Amendment rights. And I think we normalize bad behavior like that. We just say, well, that's what people can say. And the comment was about the Second Amendment. You know, something about citizens got to defend themselves. I'm going to read something into the record, and I'm going to submit something for the record. Then we'll get on. So there was a gentleman that said the following: the people's ability to arm themselves and form state militias provide a powerful check on the federal power, ensuring the populace can resist potential government overreach. In fact, went on to say that an armed citizenry is the best defense against an ambitious government. Now, the ranking member would have that person fired. What the ranking member may not realize, and I want to submit to the record, is Federalist 46, written by James Madison. So the person that created the Constitution that allows us to do our job here for 240 plus years should be fired for saying that we should have the right to protect ourselves. That's pretty outrageous. And I thought that was an important part to clarify for the record. So again, without objection, we'll submit Federalist 46 to the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. It's available at the archives as well. All right, so let's talk about Mr. Siri. I think the main issue here is about biases. Would you agree that when you have a study, now, like, I'm a business major, I'm not a science major, but I think the issue here is there a bias in your work? Would you agree that that's foundational? And all three of you can answer that. Is being free of bias important? Mr. Siri, yes or no?
Absolutely, and it's hard to find, obviously. Everybody's got a bias. That's human nature. There's no such thing as something that's unbiased. That's why you want to have as rigorous a design to a study beforehand.
So having clear biases, okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
He won't be as generous with my time. Dr. Rogers, would you agree? Yes, no? Being free of bias is really important?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then, Dr. Scott, would you agree with that?
Certainly.
Okay. So let's talk about the topic of bias.
Yeah, 21.
Would the following statement be considered biased or unbiased? Our president is a misinformation superspreader. I know this isn't surprising to a lot of people, but it's deeply disturbing. Biased comment or unbiased comment? Is that based on science?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
It
quick. This should be quick.
It reflects a bias against the president.
Dr. Rogers, a biased statement, yes or no?
Agreed, biased.
Dr. Scott, biased? Trump spews misinformation like no other. For our president to say that the problem is that doctors taking care of patients dying from COVID are venal and are committing fraud to cook the books is so low, it's subterranean. Biased or unbiased?
Yes, sir.
Biased?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Scott? Okay, that was your statement in October 25th of 2020. Trump's response to the U.S. COVID crisis when interviewed by Chris Wallace, it is what it is. Vote like your life depends on it. Biased or unbiased?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Rogers?
I think voting's a good thing, but I don't really have an opinion on that one.
But that your life depends on whether this election happens, like you will die if the wrong outcome occurs.
Yeah, that
Seems biased.
seems overstated.
Seems overstated. Dr. Scott? Okay, July of 2020, your statement. There are 69 days left of the Trump administration. While he schemes to survive politically, thousands of Americans will die. The number of COVID deaths yesterday was 1,421. If the death total 98,049 deaths will occur between now and January 20th. Biased?
Given the data at the time, I think yes.
Dr. Rogers?
COVID deaths in the Biden administration far exceeded COVID deaths during the first Trump administration.
I hope you get into his post, too.
So biased. Okay. Now, interesting because prior to me coming to Congress, people think I was in the retail automotive business, and that's true, but I also had a tech company. I'm going to tell you a 30-second story. We were asked schematic where somebody could validate whether they were vaccinated or not or tested positive or not using our blockchain agent. I thought that was terrible technology, so we decided not to do it. But when we had my tech team explore it, what I thought was fascinating was there was no way to find out who had tested positive or tested negative. There was no data. So, typically with a computer system, you have to plug into a data source, pull the data so that you can report it out. So when we went to the state and said, hey, give me tested and who tested negative, who tested positive, you know what the response was? We don't have that data. It's like, well, that's fascinating because every night when I turn on the news, they tell me it's 1,421 people died of COVID. I'm like, well, that's interesting because if the data doesn't exist, then how do you know that's true? So I just thought I'd share that with you a little bit. So the other piece of the equation is when we talk about science, I think be a certain humility. Now, my dad was a doctor. He beat in our heads that the key to being a doctor is to have humility. I think the humility should be able for us to look back 4 or 5 years later and go, we made a lot of mistakes. A lot of people were harmed. And I think it's the failure of that humility that's infuriating to a lot of people. I'll give you some examples. I have a 4-year-old grandbaby. A 2-year-old grandbaby just turned 2 yesterday. Do you think it was appropriate, yes or no, Mr. Siri, if a 2-year-old have been put a mask on, a 2-year-old? Is that a good idea?
I believe that everybody should be able to make their own medical decisions.
But again, just generally speaking, putting a mask on a 2-year-old.
I wouldn't put a mask on a 2-year-old if it was my choice.
Dr. Rogers?
No,
Dr. Scott?
I wouldn't either.
Okay. You tweeted in January of 2021 that you masked your 2-year-old and that all 2-year-olds should be masked. I'll submit the tweet for the record. I don't know that you have a 2-year-old we've never met.
Well, I changed my mind.
Okay. But again, having the humility to say that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
Having the humility, which is good. I applaud you for that. Having the humility to say, that when you walk into a bar after having a mask on outside, and then you walk to your table, and then you take your mask off to eat, made sense. We can now look back and go, that was ridiculous.
And I tweeted about that numerous times, how ridiculous that was.
So, well, I'll submit another tweet.
Bias. Selection bias right here.
I'll put your tweet on the record in which you actually said that a man walked outside with a mask, walked into a restaurant, got in a seat, took off his mask and drank a beer and sat with everybody doing the same, as in like, hey, that's normal. In fact, you said something that I thought was very interesting. You said COVID-19 may never go away. So let's keep people isolated and masked. I will submit these for the record. COVID-19 may never go away. As a way to keep people locked up inside, keep people out of schools. In my state, in my city, Cleveland, Ohio, we closed our schools for 18 months. You look at why we have youth violence today, you draw a straight line right to those decisions during COVID. That wasn't a virus that made those decisions. Those were elected officials that decided that control of people. And Dr. Scott, I'll give you a chance here. You also said that 1.2 million people died from COVID. Now, I was on the board of Metro Health. In Cleveland, we had no idea what actually caused people's mortality. What we did do, because the hospital could collect more money, was we labeled anybody who had COVID, who also died, including motorcycle accidents, of dying from COVID. I think what you meant to say, I'm going to give you a chance to clear it up. Did you mean 1.2 million people died with COVID as opposed to from COVID? See the difference?
Oh, I do see the difference. And I also commented quite a bit about the difficulty making that distinction after vaccines have become available. But I think early on, yes, there were a lot of deaths. I lost over 100 patients, okay?
COVID or with COVID?
COVID, from COVID. COVID was terrible. And
But
then
we had more
it definitely became much more complicated to reconcile people who died with COVID from COVID.
But you didn't have a problem. You were a pretty definitive statement. But what Dr. Rogers said earlier was interesting, which is more people died during the Biden years. Now, just to remind everybody, it's important. Biden put out an executive order that said if you don't get vaccinated, you could lose your job. Think about how insane our public policy got. And I think I speak for at least the people I know that this is an important issue. Just maybe start by acknowledging you made a mistake, apologizing for shaming those of us who said, yeah, that's stupid. Like, yeah, that makes no sense. And acknowledging that if we don't have sovereignty over our bodies, then we are not free people. With that, I'll end. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Marino. I got a lot of questions. We're going to take a lot of time, and people are going to have a chance to respond here. By the way, PSI hearings are definitely different than normal Senate hearings. I mean, when I first got here, it had Senator Levin. He would have a book that thick, and the hearings would literally run all day long. Go through in detail. And that's kind of what I'd like to do here tonight. It's not all day long because we only have the afternoon, but we're going to get into a lot of detail here. Dr. Scott, you did mention you treated about 100 COVID patients. Can I just ask you, what did you treat them with? What were your drugs of choice? I mean, what was the treatment?
Yeah, so I've treated hundreds of COVID patients, and
did you say you lost 100 then? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
I lost dozens of patients, probably over 100. I lost track, to be honest. Okay. It was awful. Okay. I lost many nursing home folks live nearby, and multiple a day sometimes.
But what was the protocol did you use? Did you use remdesivir? Were you using monoclonal antibodies? Did you ever try ivermectin or budesonide or some of the other generic drugs that were recommended?
So I was going based on the best available evidence. My role was actually to focus on the best available evidence for therapeutics. I helped develop the guidelines. And so, yeah, we used, remdesivir, patients met eligibility. We used dexamethasone, which clearly shows, or had been shown to be life-saving.
By the way, I had Pierre Corey, I think in May of 2020. He talked about corticosteroids. He was vilified and savaged in the media till a couple months later. They actually had a study come out of England that dexamethasone worked, which is corticosteroid. Now, generally underdosed when they gave it, but continue.
Yeah, so we used a number of things. Did I ever use ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine? I don't think so.
Were you aware of the Surgisphere study on hydroxychloroquine?
No, that doesn't sound familiar.
You've never heard of that, huh? It was published, I think, in May of 2020. Totally came out against hydroxychloroquine, but had to be retracted, I think, 2 weeks later because the data was completely made up. But it had its impact. It completely sabotaged the use of hydroxychloroquine and zinc and a Z-Pack. Well, again, just so that's just one example. It kind of surprises me if you're on the front lines trying to treat people who've never even heard of the Surgisphere, which probably turned off a lot of doctors like you who rely on the New England Journal of Medicine, even though Dr. Mark Angel said you really shouldn't or can't. But let's move on. I think Mr. Sirius kind of covered that 154 million, which was the first time I heard. Again, I would call that propaganda. It's not science. I mean, somebody's got some model, fine. I mean, I can play with numbers too. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you how you can use numbers. Dr. Scott, you talked about the Commonwealth estimate of 3.2 million lives saved here in the U.S. in 2021 and 2022, correct? You're pretty confident of that one?
It's one of a few studies. Yep, these estimates are not easy to make, but yeah, that's one study.
Was there, I mean, were there confidence intervals around that 3.2 million?
It was a modeling study, yeah. With
It
certainly
was published on a blog, wasn't it? Is that correct, Mr. Siri?
Yeah, it's a blog.
That study
the
was covered on a...
Yeah, the Commonwealth quote-unquote study is not a study, it's a blog. It's not a peer-reviewed study, it's not in a journal, it was published
So
on a blog.
let's put up this little chart that I'm somewhat famous for charts. So let's look at real data. So this is CDC data. So in 2019, total deaths in the U.S. were 2.85 million. Okay, then we had the pandemic year, 2020, 3.38 million, a little under 3.4 million. So that's an increase of a little more than 500,000 people died in the first year of COVID. The following year, 3.46 million people, more people in the second year of the pandemic, 2021. When the vaccines were rolling out, and I think we were close to 70% take up of vaccines by fall of 2021, I believe.
Some of the estimates are that by the second quarter, over 60% of Americans had some form of immunity.
Then in 2022, we started backing down. Now, I think Mr. Siri kind of argues in your piece that, if the vaccines really worked, you'd think even by 2021, because those things are being rolled out pretty quick, you'd probably see those death counts come down, but they didn't. But here's the point I'm trying to make with this Commonwealth Fund study. They estimated 3.2 million people's lives were saved in 2021 and 2022. So if you add that to the actual death count, what Commonwealth Fund is assuming is that in 2021, had it not been for the vaccines, more than 5 million people would have lost their lives in America. In 2022, 4.88 million people would have lost their lives. I mean, Dr. Scott, is that even close to credible to think that we'd go from 2.85 million lives lost in 2019, have a pandemic, no vaccines? Unfortunately, the NIH was sabotaging treatment using effective generic drugs, to telling people, don't treat at all, go home, be afraid, hope you don't have to go in the hospital where they'll plug remdesivir in your veins and hook you up to a ventilator and you probably never come off, okay? So we had no treatment, had 3.38 million. Are we really supposed to believe that next year we were going to leap up to 5 million lives lost in America? And then the following year, close to 5 again? Because that's where you'd have to be in order to save 1.6 million lives in 2021 and 2022. You'd have to be assuming the death rate was going to go from 2.85 million in 2019, 3.4 million in 2019, and then leap up to 5 million in 2021 and 22. Is that at all plausible? Do you believe that? Do you believe that we were literally, had it not been for the vaccine, 5 million Americans would have lost their lives in 2021 and 2022?
Yeah, I believe that's credible to me. I mean, were you on the front lines? Because it was awful. I honestly cannot express how terrible it was.
It was terrible.
And there was a dramatic,
it was
decline.
It was terrible in 2020.
And the total
dramatic decline in death
rates after the vaccines were rolled out.
Let's move on. Let's move on to some other.
Parse over these modeling studies, but let's talk about hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. I mean, there were a number of studies that looked into that. Some of which I was involved in.
This is about research. And by the way, I'm happy to invite you back when I'll have Dr. McCulloch and I have Dr. Good. We'll do that. Okay, we will absolutely have you come back. Hospital protocols, we'll talk about early treatment. I would love to do that because I've never been able to get people to actually debate or discuss this with the doctors that did have the courage and compassion to treat COVID, okay? And I appreciate you did as well. So anyway, so you think it's credible. I mean, the records show that Dr. Scott thinks, yeah, we had 5 million people die in 2021 and 2022. Mr. Siri, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I could ask a little bit, which is that This is part of my submission as well, that the data reflects that in 2020, when there was no vaccine, the vaccine was first rolled out at the end of December 2020, about 18% of folks, 17% of Americans were infected. And presumably, by the way, the weakest, most frail among us passed away in 2020. Then we get to 2021, where again the data reflects, and this is my submission, around the same percentage of Americans were again infected. You pointed out that was the increase. Then there was a vaccine in 2021, The vaccination rate went through all, sky high by the second quarter of 2021. When Delta's coming, the immunity rate, according to the data, is over 60%, but yet all-cause mortality increases. And I'll point out one last thing about this. Remdesivir, this is a great example of the corruption.
You know what nurses call that? Run, death is near.
Well, I'll give you an example of the corruption of science with remdesivir. The way you should do a study is you come up with a study design, and then you implement it, because this way you avoid introducing bias. If you start the study and then you're like, ooh, you don't like what you're finding, and you change the study design, that introduces bias. And that is exactly what happened during the remdesivir clinical trial. The endpoints in the middle of the trial were changed by Gilead as it was going on. In fact, we wrote to Dr. Fauci specifically about that. That is precisely what you should never do. It introduces bias so they can get the results.
By the way, do you remember how many people had some kind of financial conflict of interest, the people that approved that with Gilead?
Yes.
It's like 9 out of 16 or something like that.
A significant number. And obviously, there's lots of folks who've treated COVID during the pandemic, and there's lots of, you had Dr. Jordan here, for example, and he's had a clinic. I think he has dozens and dozens of clinics around the country, and he lost, as he would explain, once the protocols he implemented, lost very few people to COVID. I know other doctors in that similar situation using budesonide and so forth.
Dr. Rogers, you have something, Dr. Scott, I think you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to add to this debate. So I watched every single meeting of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices and the Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee in 2021, 2022, and 2023, when all these shots were being authorized for use in this country. And after a while, the CDC's own research showed that the protection from the vaccine, if any, was between months 2 and 6. And by 6 months, it showed negative efficacy. So I'm watching the hearings on my, computer screen at home. I'm yelling at the screen. The COVID shots have negative efficacy after 6 months. Tell me how a shot with negative efficacy is saving lives, and it has the worst side effect profile of any vaccine in human history. So how exactly is a vaccine with the worst side effects and negative efficacy saving lives? That's a preposterous claim. What ended the COVID pandemic was the Omicron variant that was more transmissible but less lethal. The vaccine, how many people it helped? I think it's an open debate. It could be a net negative.
Well, maybe we can look at the clinical trial data in which 21 people died in the vaccinated group and 17 died in the placebo group.
I do want to, again, I believe the first study that came out of showing negative efficacy came out of Denmark. But Dr. Scott, you said you wanted to say something, then I'll turn it over to Senator Blumenthal.
Well, I just want to say, in 2020, 2021, my colleagues and I were doing absolutely everything we could to save lives. Okay, we weren't using remdesivir because we were paid to use remdesivir. And remdesivir, I have to say, I never thought was, a game changer, but it's not that.
By the way, the hospitals were paid handsomely for using remdesivir.
Okay, well, I never saw that.
And coding somebody as a COVID patient as well. But
I never saw that. But in terms of whether or not the vaccine saved lives, it's not just that one study. I mean, there's there's a Stanford Ioannidis study from that was published in JAMA recently that showed that the COVID vaccines probably averted 2.5 million deaths You're cherry picking by saying that I'm, hanging my hat on that one Commonwealth study. I'm not, because I've also posted about these other studies as well. How many lives did the COVID vaccine save? I don't know. I don't know for sure. But I did see with my own eyes the dramatic decline in deaths between December of 2020 and mid 2021.
Variants did change, and Omicron was less lethal. But
Delta
was a real problem.
Omicron didn't hit until 2022.
I understand. Delta was a real problem. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think we all know that COVID-19, a devastating impact on families across the country, caused deaths and still impacts the lives of a lot of people. The creation of COVID-19 vaccines through Operation Warp Speed, led by then President Trump and now President Trump, was not just one of the greatest achievements in his administration, but it changed the course of the pandemic. The vaccine saved lives to begin to rebuild. But unfortunately, just as the vaccine became available, a lot of misinformation about its safety and efficacy spread, and hostility toward vaccines and the public health system that monitors them makes them less available. I want to ask you, you saw firsthand what it was like to treat patients when the COVID-19 pandemic began and after the vaccine was approved and disseminated. Based on the studies you've done, do you believe that the COVID-19 vaccines and others have helped save lives and been safe and effective?
Thank you, Senator. So when it comes to safety, I personally am not a big fan of the slogan "vaccines are safe and effective" because there are nuances. Right? Nothing is 100% safe. Are COVID vaccines 100% safe? No. Are they generally very safe? Yes. Are they the least safe vaccine ever? No. That's absurd. Show me some evidence that indicates that.
About ready to.
Yeah, please. I'll come back to discuss that. Effective. Yes, so 2020 was like nothing my colleagues or I had ever seen or expected. It was awful. I'm not making this up, okay? It was just a nightmare. And despite our best efforts, I lost many patients.
Let me ask you, is there a reason you believe that the Henry Ford Health System study published and has flaws?
Yes, I think that's a great question. So one important question is, which peer-reviewed journals have reviewed and rejected this manuscript? What biological mechanism could explain vaccines increasing ear infections by 600%? Do you accept the study's null finding for autism, or only the results that support your narrative? What are the models that adjust for the massive difference in healthcare visits between groups? The analysis reports 0 cases of common conditions like ADHD. That is statistically impossible. There was a cohort of 2,000 children. There should have been hundreds of such diagnoses, unless they were undetected. And let me just clarify, when I said flawed by design, I didn't mean that they deliberately, meant for it to be flawed. I just meant the study design itself had flaws in it. Okay, it was methodologically flawed, not deliberately flawed, of course.
And thousands of studies have been done and published, correct?
Correct.
And let me ask you, the seeming assumption here is that this is the only study that ever has gone unpublished. In fact, a lot of studies go unpublished, correct?
306. Yeah, no, for.
Yeah, and I review studies before they're published for a number of different journals. And
Because they're subject to peer review
right.
and
it's not just
analysis.
one person. It's, yeah, multiple people are reviewing these articles. And if something warrants publication, it's, you know, the other thing is, you know, I've recently been reviewing hundreds and hundreds of papers for these two massive vaccines.
To be published
Delta 288.
isn't the only means to make a study public, correct?
Delta 282.
In fact, in this body, we have press conferences, we do hearings. This particular study was done and completed in 2020, and now, apparently, for the first time, it's being revealed.
Right.
Has it been available during this last 5 years?
That's a great question. I mean, there's, you know, preprints, Substacks, obviously, a number of ways to get a study out there. The fact that it's been shelved for 5 years, I think, is saying something.
Mr. Siri, why haven't you held a press conference? Why have you kept this study under wraps?
I appreciate the question. It's never been submitted to a journal, and the hope has always been that it would be submitted to a journal, because I agree, review. It should be submitted to a journal, but they will not submit it because they don't want to get fired. That is what they told me. We've met with the authors many times. These are validly pro-vaccine individuals. They don't want their institution, the journals, their funding sources, their friends, their colleagues, everybody to turn against them, which is exactly what will happen if they even submit this thing.
But that is not my question, and I apologize for
I'm sorry.
interrupting because I'm limited on time. There are lots of other ways to make findings known.
They don't want to get.
No, I'm talking to you.
Oh, because I want they are the scientists. They're the ones who have their name on it. They should put it out, not me. My hope is that they would put it out. I wanted the normal course scientific process to work. Look, it's a retrospective epidemiological study. Let them put it in a preprint. Let it go through peer review. Let others try to replicate it. Maybe they'll find a different result.
I'm really curious why you and Senator Johnson or another member of the Congress or members of the health community didn't hold.
Let me answer that for you.
Can I just finish my question?
Sure, go ahead,
Mr. Chairman.
But I'm going to answer it for you.
I'm curious why, for the first time,
yes,
we're hearing about a study which was completed 5 years ago.
Like I said, my hope has always been that the scientists would publish it, and we've tried to persuade them many, many times so it can go through the normal peer review process, run ahead and go put it out there, because you know what that would do? It's going to happen exactly what's happening right now, is you're going to say the things that you're saying, Senator, well, you know, this is not going through the normal process. This isn't getting submitted to a journal. The answer to that is, I'm going to say it again, it epitomizes the corruption of science. It shows precisely why studies that show vaccines have problems never get published.
I don't think, with all due respect, Mr. Siri, that you've answered my question.
Let me answer it, okay?
And
let me answer.
Chairman,
your time's
the reason
expired.
we have witnesses is so that
I
they can answer our question.
But I'm part of this. I'm part of this answer, okay? First of all, you're not paying attention to what they're saying. The people who conducted this study, highly professional, highly respected, obviously concerned about their jobs. Del Bigtree and Aaron Siri convinced them to do this study. They don't want to have their jobs. Respect the fact that these people actually did the study as they requested. When I found,
with all due respect, we have a vote going on. I'm going to leave to vote because more than 90 of our colleagues have voted, and I don't want to miss the vote. Okay. So if you want to hold your answer until I get back, that's fine. I really want to hear from the witness, not from you, Mr. Chairman, because we can talk to each other anytime.
I am the one that prompted this release. Once I found out about it, I said, well, if you don't release it, if they don't release it,
why didn't he tell you about it earlier?
I'm going to release it.
Why didn't he come forward and?
Because he felt sympathy for the authors about losing their jobs. I'm sorry, I feel the same sympathy, but this is too important to protect their jobs. This is information the public should have had in 2020, and I forced the issue. There's the bottom line. I forced the issue. So there's your answer.
4915, 6783.
But by the way, you can go and vote. You're welcome to come back. This hearing is going to go on for quite some time because we're going to go through this in detail, okay?
Okay.
So this hearing is going to go on for quite some time.
As another American once said, I shall return. Thank you.
Okay. Look forward to it. I think I'm going to lay the COVID injection aside for the time being, but we'll come back because we keep hearing these hundreds and thousands of studies. And one thing I do want to enter into the record is Mr. Siri, what is it, about 2:30 in the morning?
Yes, sir.
Having received testimony, did a very organized and very effective response to Dr. Scott's testimony. And I want to enter that into the record. But, Mr. Siri, I'd like you to go to your section and talk about the 661 studies that Dr. Scott is talking about in terms of these inert placebo controls. And just describe that in detail. I think it's interesting.
Sure. Actually, I think Dr. Scott has done a great service in terms of pointing out the lack of clinical trials supporting the safety of the routine injected childhood vaccines. You see, he's saying there are 661 inert trials to support the safety of the routine injected childhood vaccines. But when you actually drill down into those 661 trials, let me give you the breakdown of them, okay? 567 of these trials were not a routine injected vaccine for a disease on the CDC childhood schedule. They were for HIV vaccines or other vaccines. So totally irrelevant to the safety of routine injected childhood vaccines. The remaining 94 studies, 70 of them did not involve healthy children. For example, trials of HIV positive adults. Again, completely irrelevant to the safety of childhood vaccines. Of the remaining 24, 21 did not involve a U.S. licensed vaccine was not a vaccine used as a control to license a currently used U.S. licensed vaccine. For example, a Chinese one we have in terms of with regards to the licensure of child vaccines. I want good clinical trial data. I need it for my practice. Okay, let me walk through those three. One was a trial for the chickenpox vaccine, the varicella vaccine. Now that trial had, it was only a few hundred people, so it was underpowered anyway. But Dr. Scott says it's got an inert control, but actually it was an injection of neomycin, an antibiotic. That's not inert. No. And neomycin used topically can cause issues, let alone injected. The second one was Gardasil 4 trial, which had thousands and thousands of girls and women in the control group. Almost all of them got an aluminum adjuvant injection. And then there were a few hundred, only a few hundred, that were labeled as a inert control, but they weren't. They got everything that's in the vial except for the antigens in the alum, which included L-histidine, sorbate 80, sodium borate, not inert. And then the third one was a Gardasil 9 trial, which finally, by the way, did have a saline injection.
One suffers a serious adverse event. We are here today to end the silence for the 1 in 800. It is time to stop politicizing vaccine injuries and start building meaningful recognition, research, competent care, and fair and just compensation. At React 19, we say we've had negative reactions, but we're about seeking positive actions. I will not stop until these humanitarian goals are met. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walscock. Our next witness is Mr. Aaron Siri. Ms. Siri is the managing partner of Siri and Glimstad with over 85 professionals. He has handled numerous high-profile cases involving challenges to medical mandates, restoring exemptions, agency transparency, including forcing FDA to release the COVID-19 vaccine licensure, and deposing immunologists, infectious disease doctors, and vaccinologists. Mr. Siri.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Our vaccine practice, I believe, which has over 40 professionals, it doesn't represent pharmaceutical companies, I believe is the largest vaccine practice in the world.
When we litigate vaccine cases, we cannot rely on credentials or fancy titles. We have to prove our claims with high-impact data and sources. For example, I saw a slide put up that showed 3 million lives were saved from COVID-19 vaccines. The citation to it was to the Commonwealth Fund. If you follow that, that's not a peer-reviewed study. That's a blog. It's a blog that used a mathematical model to calculate that 3 million lives were saved. So I agree with the Senator Blumenthal who said, quote, claims made, I think you meant regarding vaccines, we need to examine the evidence. And that's an example of that. We need to look carefully at the evidence we are relying upon when we are making claims about vaccines. I don't think that if I went into court and I was relying on a blog that used a mathematical model, I would be laughed out of court if I was making those claims about vaccines. But unfortunately, when it comes to promoting vaccines, well, that's what we often see. The underlying data is not typically really carefully evaluated. Claims about what vaccines do when they're positive, because our health agencies are responsible for promoting them, easily made. Claims that vaccines cause any harms or injuries often get ignored no matter how good the underlying data. I also heard that deaths sharply declined in 2021. Well, when you look at all-cause mortality in the United States, deaths in 2021 went up compared to 2020, and presumably most of the most frail, the weak among us died in 2020 from COVID. We should have had a reduction in all-cause mortality in the United States. We did not. And those numbers, you can't argue it. They're binary. You're either dead or you're alive. You can argue whether the vaccine killed you or didn't kill you, whether COVID killed you or didn't kill you. But it can't argue with all-cause mortality. And we did not have a reduction in all-cause mortality in 2021. We had an increase. And we really need to answer that question. We have sent many letters to our federal health officials trying to get an answer to that. With that said, not only do we need to carefully study the data and science before we go and litigate our vaccine cases, because again, I don't have an MD or a PhD or an MPH, we also need to understand the economic and regulatory framework. And COVID-19 vaccines did not just fall into a vacuum. They fell into a very well-developed regulatory and economic framework for vaccines that has developed over the last 40 years. For every product on the market, you can sue the manufacturer for harm, for design defect claims, meaning the claim that the product could have made safer. I mean, literally, look around this room, planes, cars, pharmaceutical drugs, every one. There's only one product in America. You cannot sue the manufacturer for design defect claim to claim that it could have been made safer. And that are vaccines, injections, vaccines. My definition of vaccine is any product for which the government needs to give it immunity from harms. To me, that's what a vaccine is, because some prevent infection, some don't. That's what a vaccine is, meaning it can't survive without that immunity, apparently. Why did vaccines get this immunity, which was provided in 1986 under the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act? Because leading up to 86, there were only 3 routine childhood vaccines, MMR, OPV, and DTP, and they were causing so much harm and causing so much life that all the manufacturers were going out of business to stop making them. And Congress, instead of forcing those manufacturers to do what every other product manufacturer needs to do in that situation, which is what? Make a better, safer product. Instead, said, you know what?
Fucking a neutralized vehicle over there.
We're going to make it so nobody can sue you for those harms. And you can keep selling your product to the American public no matter how many children it kills or injures. And the issue is that immunity was not just given for those 3 products. It was given for any.
Yeah, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to sleep.
I
Fake police vehicles to fuck with your television.
The regulatory framework in which vaccines have developed over the last 40 years. We have now gone from 3 injections in the first year of life under the CDC schedule in 86 to 29 injections, including in utero, if a child follows the CDC schedule today. Every one of those vaccines, save one, was developed by a pharmaceutical company knowing they would not be responsible for the injuries that are caused by those products. So when you have drug trials or pharmaceutical companies, they care about losing money. They don't want to lose money on their drugs. They often do multi-year placebo-controlled trials before they get on the market because they don't want to end up upside down. They're there to make money. But with vaccine products, because they don't have that financial incentive, they have the actual disincentive. Almost every childhood vaccine in this country is licensed based on clinical trials with no placebo control, save for COVID-19 vaccine.
I haven't seen no cats.
Up to maybe 6 months
you seen cats?
after injection.
Yep.
And are often extremely underpowered. Those trials could never have really confirmed the safest product. And my submission to this committee laid out every single vaccine and put them in detail. I will, since I'm running out of time, I'll just
wrap up by saying this. You might say, well, okay, the pharmaceutical companies did that, but why would the FDA allow it? It's because, unfortunately, our federal health authorities are hopelessly conflicted. Congress gave them conflicting structural duties. They're responsible for promoting vaccines and for defending them in the Vaccine Compensation Program. And you also ask them to be responsible for safety.
Yeah.
Those conflict. One has overtaken the other. And for the most part, based on our over 2,000 FOIA requests to federal health agencies over the years on behalf of our client, I could tell you, our federal health agencies act like partners with pharma. They not only encourage their inroads, they act basically in the shoes of pharma, because when the immunity to liability to the pharmaceutical companies, Congress recognized that apparently and transferred all the safety
Fucking
functions
neutralized
to
vehicle over
HHS
there.
and the mandate for safer childhood vaccines. And by doing so, it's made them hopelessly conflicted. That was a very, very quick way to try and convey the regulatory and economic framework into which COVID-19 vaccines fell into, and why, from the pharmaceutical and FDA's perspective, the COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials may have been robust, and they were compared to childhood vaccines, but compared to drugs, somebody that actually
Hey, you guys don't
safety,
mind if I keep some
absolutely were
stuff
not
while I'm waiting on
robust. They were
construction
clinically
dumpster?
anemic. And as for post-licensure, regulators
By the trees,
did
I've
their
left
job,
them
but
over there.
really they acted like
Instead of
pharmaceutical
fucking me
companies
with the
seeking
whole
to cover up
neighborhood
harms
thing.
and avoid reputational damage and financial liability. I hope this hearing can help begin the process of changing that. Thank you, and I apologize for going over on my time.
Oh, I don't know. The city's supposed to.
Our final witness is governor and doctor. I've always found senators like to be called doctor, if they are one. So governor and
Hey, you
Dr.
guys don't
Josh Green.
mind if I
Governor
keep
Green
some
is the
stuff
9th
while I'm
governor of
waiting on
Hawaii.
construction
He earned
dumpster?
his degrees in
The
biology
tree.
and anthropology from
Well, the
Swire
trees, I've left them over there.
and an MD
Instead of
from
fucking me
Penn
with the
State's
whole
College of
neighborhood
Medicine.
thing.
Dr. Green served 2 terms in the Hawaii House of Representatives, 3 terms in the Hawaii State Senate, and a term as lieutenant governor.
Oh, I don't know. The city's supposed to bring a construction dumpster, hopefully. If they do, they do.
Thank you, Chair Johnson.
But yeah, they brought up the
Thank
tree
you so much
thing.
for welcoming me.
I got to
Thank
cut the
you,
tree down.
Ranking Member
Don't have. And it
first
started
of all,
growing on. Yeah.
I'm coming to you as a physician.
Yeah, for a few days.
When I speak as a doctor, I'm here to say that vaccines save lives. Period.
Yeah,
I care about saving lives.
Yeah, yeah, because I definitely ain't throwing in my driveway.
This room, I believe, cares about saving lives. But I've seen firsthand children dying from the spread of preventable diseases.
It's weird. I have Bluetooth problems when this guy walks in here with a backpack.
People lose faith. I've
And it's a Blue Lexus WPN117.
In the house next door.
Kind of a weird program they got. I started picking up on radio lies too. Trying to fuck with me and my mother on television when we ain't even watching TV.
COVID liaison in my state of 1.4 million people.
It's weird. I have Bluetooth problems when this guy walks in here with a backpack.
Trump and his team. And then subsequently, as Lieutenant Governor,
And it's a Blue Lexus W17.
I appreciate that President
Kind of a
Trump
weird program they got. I started picking up on radio lies too. Trying to fuck with me and my mother on television when we ain't even watching
I worked as an
TV.
emergency room physician virtually every single weekend for 20 plus years, including through the whole pandemic. And this is what I saw. I saw people dying of terrible disease when they caught the Delta variant of COVID especially. I saw people recover better when they had been vaccinated. In Hawaii, we had the lowest mortality rate in the country. We had the highest vaccination rate in the country. People have asked me in the course of the prep for this hearing, well, is Hawaii safer because it's a tropical island state? No, actually, it's quite the contrary. We had COVID coming from east in Asia, where it originated, and west, travelers from the mainland. But we put together programs based on science, day by after case, because there was so much uncertainty. And I was able to share in our state where we had infectious disease doctors, where we had extra need for ventilators, where we had extra need for vaccinations, where the rates were lower. And day by day, working with all the healthcare providers in my state and listening to others, not mandating. I'm not a mandate guy. That may come as a surprise to some today. We were able to make sure that we had a science-based response. We put together a safe travels program which tested anyone coming into the island travel, or that they would isolate, quarantine if they were positive so they wouldn't spread the disease. And over time, we had the experience that no one else had. We saw death rates constantly lower than all the other states, with the single exception of Vermont on occasion. I tell you this because we have to follow science, and I truly believe that we can't politicize science or vaccinations or any of these public health matters. And it's very important going forward. This is where we should unite with one another. We should heal our country together in this space. Now, another experience I had, measles. I was the doctor that was asked to go to Samoa when they had their outbreak of measles. Why did they have their outbreak? Because they lost faith in the vaccination program. And it was tragic. The Children's Health Defense went there and they scared people. After tragedy. Admittedly, it should have never happened. I had children die in my arms who were not vaccinated but died of measles. This beautiful boy was with me and a pediatrician. Dr. Nadine Tensala had a terrible case of the measles, passed away from the disease. But we went there and we vaccinated 37,000 individuals in 48 hours, and the measles just stopped. And I say this because this is what we have to look forward to in the future. If we somehow fall into a place where we don't believe in vaccinations any longer, and we shouldn't do it blindly, we should study them, we should check for safety. Absolutely, that is essential in science. But these vaccinations save lives. They saved many lives during COVID. In my state, they saved over 10,000 lives. We anticipated mass casualties, which we never saw because we fought this disease with great intelligence and great acumen. I will tell you this. There are lots of things to share today. Protests resonated through the COVID experience in my state. People protested at my home, around my family. But the leader of the protests ultimately, after I was worried that he would catch COVID, did exactly that. Ended up in grave, grave peril. His wife was in the intensive care unit. His name was Witkoff. He later disavowed the protests against the vaccinations after seeing individual after individual after individual be intubated and go into the ICU because he experienced it. And that's what we as physicians see too often. Once a tragedy occurs, and my heart is with everyone who had any kind of reaction to the vaccines that we're talking about or loses a loved one. Of course, we love our fellow mankind, but we cannot turn away from science. So these are some of the things I wanted to share with you today. Ultimately, we have to decide whether we're going to be committed to public health in our country. And right now, we are in great peril. It is absolutely my firm belief that vaccines have saved millions of lives over the last 50 years, 150 million by many people's accounts. It's decreased infant mortality by 40% globally. And we have to continue to commit ourselves in this way. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned that as we end up in a politicized discussion, that we will move away from science. We will not trust one another, experts. We will not trust one another, and we will end up in conflict. So what I would say is this. Let's work together. Let's find a way to actually find the common ground to protect our children. Let's find a way to make sure our public health system remains intact, not taken apart by the current approach where HHS is jettisoning many of its people, many of the billions of dollars, perhaps many of the vaccinations. This is our opportunity to come together. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this as the hearing goes on, but I'll say one last time. Vaccines save lives. I've given vaccines. I've taken vaccines. I've treated people that didn't get vaccines, and it's broken my heart when they've passed away.
Thank you, Governor Green. Quick comment. I'm not aware anybody on my side of this issue has politicized it. The accusation is always that we're not. You did state, by the way, 10,000 lives saved in Hawaii. I would love to have your citation, so if you can give us a study, so we can put that in the record. And any other citation, give us on the millions of lives saved by vaccines as well. I mean, again, I want to know the truth. Just real quick, I've got a couple other charts I want to put up there. This is a chart, a lot of people produced it.
Chairman, if I could just interrupt for 10 seconds over here.
Sure.
Is today's, just a point of order, are we talking about vaccines or are we talking about the COVID vaccine?
Well, specifically, we were talking about the hiding of the safety signal on myocarditis.
So we're not talking about all vaccines?
We can talk about anything you want to.
Okay.
I mean, again, it has obviously opened up because we're also talking about the corruption of science. And I think science has been corrupted. So fair game. So, and again, I appreciate you staying here and stick around and ask a lot of questions. I think you'll learn an awful lot. Put my time back on the clock. No, I'll take whatever I want. This is a chart. This is a chart. Again, I was looking at the VAERS. You know, I had been.
Mr. Chairman, that's not the way I ran this subcommittee. I
had been, well, this is a different, again, I'll be very generous, okay? I was actually instructed as a non-doctor what the COVID injections were. Encapsulated in lipid nanoparticle that was designed to permeate difficult to permeate barriers. So they lied to us when they said they'd stay in the arm. They knew it wouldn't. They had a study, the Japanese regulators uncovered that when they did do a biodistribution study in rats, it distributed all over the body. So that was the first lie. Didn't really talk about too much about the toxicity yet of the lipid nanoparticle, but it goes all over the body. So I was aware, and again, that this was not a standard vaccine. This isn't a attenuated or dead virus that the body reacts to. This actually hijacks the cell, has the cell produce the spike protein, which is toxic to the body, which means the body attacks. Again, I'm a layman, but it's pretty simple for me to understand this. So I was aware of this like in October. So I'm watching theirs, and so I'm publishing these charts, and I'm being censored. I see the next chart, chart number 2. This is the full history of theirs and the number of deaths being reported associated with the vaccine. You got a couple hundred a year until 2021, and yikes, 21,725 deaths worldwide. Why? And everybody's saying, no, this is safe and effective. The vaccine injured were being gaslit. They weren't being treated. They're still being gaslit. There is no, by the way, there is no compassion, Governor. I could fill this room with photos of people who are dead because of the COVID injection. I could fill the room. And that is being denied. That is being denied. It is being denied. And these people haven't been able to get help. I held an event in Milwaukee in June 2019 and 2021, and all the vaccine injured, those women, all they wanted was to be seen and heard and believed, and they are not to this day. Okay? So again, they're not the ones politicizing. They just want to be helped. They want compassionate doctors to treat them, to recognize what caused their illness, not gaslight and not deny that it exists. But anyway, so you take a look at this chart, and they're still denying that this, nothing to see here. This is safe and this is effective. Okay? Next chart. This is the current VAERS chart. 38,607 deaths reported worldwide associated with the COVID injection. And we know VAERS dramatically understates, by a factor of 10, 100? We know it understates it. 9,228 of those deaths are occurring on the day of vaccination, the 1 or 2 days. Okay, I know VAERS doesn't prove causation, but man, that's a correlation we should have been looking at, but they ignored and they censored. Enough of that. Dr. McCullough, please, in my layman's terms, I just kind of laid out the harmful mechanisms of this injection. Can you and Dr. Vaughn, because I think you've both spoken to this, again, in layman's terms, talk about why this caused so much harm in so many different ways because of the biodistribution. Dr. McCullough.
80% of Americans took a vaccine. 20% didn't. 20% did not take a vaccine. The vaccine was never safe enough for me to take. Messenger RNA, devised by Pfizer and Moderna, has been chemically modified to be unassailable to enzymes in the body to be broken down. The messenger RNA is found in the human heart of people who die after the vaccine. It's found in the brain. The spike protein is found everywhere in the body. 3 studies now show the spike protein is circulating in the blood for 6 to 9 months after people take the shot. This part of the virus, the lethal part of the virus, in the vaccinated, it's circulating in the blood. And then they take a booster, they get more circulating in the blood. It is a killer protein. It cannot be safe. It was not safe by design. Safety trumps efficacy. We cannot tolerate false drug claims. And we saw a poster behind Senator Blumenthal makes drug claim that vaccines saved millions of lives, specifically the COVID vaccine. Well, let's take a look at that. When someone signs consent for a vaccine, Senator Blumenthal, does the consent form say it's going to save their lives? Of course it doesn't. It's not on the FAQ. There's never been a prospective, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial ever showing that COVID-19 vaccines reduce mortality or hospitalization. There's not even a valid non-randomized study. Thankfully, COVID mortality went down for 3 reasons. Because we all got the infection, vaccinated and unvaccinated, so we developed population natural immunity. We developed early treatment. Credit to Operation Warp Speed. We used all the Operation Warp Speed tools, additional drugs. We treated patients with multi-drug protocols at home so they don't go to the ER. So Governor Green never saw the patients we treated because they were successfully treated at home. And the third reason is the virus mutated to a much milder form. Those things
Neutralized vehicle over there.
The vaccine cannot be falsely credited. We can't allow false drug advertising to be put up on a poster behind one of our public servants. We cannot accept that.
Let me quick.
Yeah, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to sleep. Fake police vehicles to fuck with your television is kind of a problem.
This is something I developed September 2021, and this shows the number of daily cases of COVID, and you see it's peaking in January. Right as we're rolling out the vaccine, but we really haven't injected anybody. If by the time we had any kind of significant uptake of the vaccines, we were way down in terms of the number of daily cases. I mean, this virus was burning us out. Okay, now, we had different variants. Again, I've read a lot of information about vaccination into the midst of a pandemic driving variants. Is that what happened? I don't know. But you would think if a vaccine were that effective, the tail would just continue and the pandemic would be over. But that's not what happened. We had a whole new surge.
I haven't seen no cats. You see any cats? Nope. I haven't seen none. No cats over here, no. You're smart.
More difficult to treat. But fortunately, by that time, we had treatments.
Smart cat.
I just wanted to put this thing up here again. If, again, to a layman, if the vaccine really worked, was that prevent all that disease? They all admitted that it didn't prevent transmission. They lied to us about that for 4 months, maybe a year. Then they finally had to admit it didn't prevent transmission. But again, this chart right here just shows you that this vaccine really would have worked. You wouldn't have had this. You would have had this. But I'll turn it over to Zoom.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I think we'll try to certainly stay within our 7 minutes so our colleagues can have their daily questions.
But again, we'll have second, third, fourth rounds. I mean, we'll use up the time of this hearing.
You know, the debate here seems to be about the efficacy of COVID-19.
Hey, you guys don't mind if I keep some stuff where I'm waiting on a construction dumpster? Well, the trees, I left them over there. Instead of fucking me with the whole neighborhood thing.
And I just want to make the point. How long is it? Like a lawyer, not a physician.
Oh, I don't know. The city's supposed to bring a construction dumpster, hopefully. If they do, they do. They don't know. So. But yeah, they brought up the tree thing, so I got to cut the tree down.
Okay.
The one you cut in half. And it went on, yeah.
Yeah, for a few days, but I don't want it laying in a long time. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I definitely ain't throwing in my driveway. Yeah.
On May 14th, almost 2 weeks before the CDC decided to issue clinical consideration.
It's up in a neutralized vehicle over there.
On myocarditis, which is, by the way, majority sites in this so-called cover-up. The CDC's National Center of Immunization and Respiratory Disease sent an email to state and local health departments around the country entitled, quote, monitoring reports of myocarditis, end quote. The email noted risks and contained a reminder that providers were obligated to report cases. They sent out a follow-up email urging recipients to let providers in their region know of risks and reminding them once again of the obligation to report cases. I have 2 emails here that are in the majority report. They're available to the public. I ask that they be made a part of the record, Mr. Chairman.
Objection?
I'm not going to read them. They're for everyone to see. One begins with, I would like to flag a message we sent out late Friday night. I encourage you to forward this important message about vaccine safety and reporting, and it goes on. Warning, far from a cover-up, these public health officials were trying to alert scientists, doctors, the public about the potential side effects.
Clear for people going the wrong way. 358
Mr. Siri and I are both proud and issuing that kind of warning is far from evidence of trying to hide or conceal something. You can say they were wrong somehow, but intentional cover-up is not within the realm of the plausible allegations here. So I think we need to be really clear and careful when we start discrediting scientists or public health officials. I'd like to ask Governor Green, can you tell us how, as a physician, publicly funded research, which is being cut by this administration, is important to establish not only new vaccines, but also the safety and efficacy of ongoing use of vaccines?
Thank you, Senator. So, as governors, we rely on funding to do so many things from the federal government, and cuts to research will be devastating. You can't just simply pause research and wait until a different ideology resumes governing, or until we get through these hearings and we restart critical research projects. We will lose ground on this science and the science that benefits from it, the R&D that goes forward. We've all been very supportive for decades of advanced scientific research. Sometimes it happens through the military, sometimes through our universities. We are in deep trouble if we stop the research component of our commitment to our people. So be in grave danger if we don't do the public health assessment in our states, in our rural areas, because we will not even know what we're being affected by. We will be blind to the diseases that roll through our communities, whether it's chronic disease or acute disease from an infection like this. And I just need to address a couple statements that I feel are misconceptions. And I'm not judging. I feel that there is a misconception that the COVID vaccination didn't decrease the severity of disease. That is what it did. It decreased the severity, and I saw this clinically, and we saw this from a public health standpoint. It decreased the severity of what people were facing, so they didn't die, or they died at a much lower rate. And you can see that in the charts that we've seen, but through looking at them through a different lens, the exact same charts. When the death rates dropped because people had begun to develop immunity, because their immune system, the vaccination, and in fairness, we could debate the language, but even some of the individuals that are also testifying with me here today referred repeatedly to the mRNA vaccination because it was putting these particles into people, and then the immune system was responding to them. And so I do feel that it's a vaccination, but be that as it may, we ultimately saw the ability to stop the severe and deadly cases in our hospitals. And so there are many ways to view vaccinations. There's many ways to view treatments, and they're all valuable. For some, vaccinations straight up stop infection from occurring. That's the case when we talk about measles. Measles, mumps, rubella, when you get that vaccine, you really prevent the spread to a great degree. And it was commented earlier that we were misleading, or we were being misled by others on what the vaccinations were doing and what the information was that was being shared. Well, let me tell you what it was like during that period. And we all saw it. There was a great deal of confusion because the unknown was so enormous. And to the credit of scientists and to the credit of those who invested in the research at, again, extreme speed and extreme dollars, we were able, as a nation and a global community, to find our way to something that helped us. Now, of course, there were some tragic outcomes, and again, not a single case should ever be dismissed, minimized. No one should be impugned. But the grander picture of a vaccination program is to protect all and to find a way to protect people so that they can also help protect the people around them, which is why the research is important, the spending is important, why I'm very concerned about the announcement yesterday that we will only be recommending vaccinations for people over 65 or those with chronic disease, because a couple points. One, first of all, and I'm sure many of you had this experience, the chairman mentioned going to Swarthmore College, which is my alma mater. The president of our class, Nick Jesdanin, 51 years old, unvaccinated because the vaccinations were not yet available, healthy, a marathon runner, infection. He was a prominent writer, an extraordinary human being, but utterly healthy. And that may have been, of course, more rare than an 82-year-old or a 91-year-old contracting COVID and dying, but it does happen. He is an individual that would have been vaccinated immediately when given the opportunity. And also, the reasons that we were able to avoid so many unnecessary deaths in a very difficult to treat state, where we have 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 generations of people living under the same roof with one provider. The challenge there is if we suddenly can't vaccinate teenagers or people who are 28 years old and are the breadwinners for their community, and we have another pandemic, or we have this outbreak worsen again, they will come home with the disease and very likely spread it to those who are vulnerable. And so I'll pause there. I just say that we should give people choice and we should honor and respect their stories, but we have to do the research.
But their stories haven't been honored and respected. Our next question will be Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you. Governor, I guess I just would like to stay with you here for a sec, because I think you have an interesting perspective, someone who's both a doctor as well as a elected public official in an executive position. And I'm trying to, digest the information that I'm here to talk about it to my constituents back in New Jersey, and if they're watching this, public official. I think that a lot of this is beyond what the average person understands. It's beyond what I understand in terms of the fullness of what happens in terms of our health system. So, from your experience, Governor, and when these cases come forward, these cases that Dr. McCulloch and others have raised, in terms of these concerns, what's supposed to kick in? How does this system work? You've talked about this, saying that we have a robust system for safety, that the system is designed to monitor, identify, and transparently report possible side effects, to review. Can you explain to me and my constituents how this unfolds and what to expect?
Yes, thank you, Senator. So the way it should work is that we totally support science and we support public health, so that we are able in labs and in public health offices to take in the concerns, the complaints, the vignettes, the data, and analyze it thoroughly. And to the chairman's concern, I'm sure some people were not listened to, or they felt not listened to, and that should never happen. That is one of the great challenges of our modern time, where we're talking past one another, where when people are spreading their stories anonymously, sometimes they're spread in ways that are not really even from the individual who's suffering themselves. They're great challenges. But we have to have this robust system. And how do you talk to people? How do I talk to people? In my state, and many people feel that we had the most positive and effective strategy to deal with COVID was because we did something very simple. It was partially accidental. In the early days of COVID, I started a whiteboard. And ultimately, tens then hundreds of thousands of people followed this whiteboard. And just so people know that it didn't have bias implicit or otherwise. It didn't have partisanship. I just put the actual numbers that we had to the minute of how many cases that day, how many people were vaccinated, how many beds we had, how many intensive care unit beds were available, how many ventilators were available at each facility, how many infectious disease doctors, and so on. So that if someone truly didn't believe COVID was a threat, and some people felt that way, they could just look at the data and decide for themselves how they would respond to their constituents about something that's this disconcerting, in fact, terrifying. And we just showed day after day after day, in a brief moment, sometimes 90 seconds, exactly what we had as the best data, long before we had these very complex reports from Johns Hopkins or USC or other universities, okay? Before we had that, we had our capacity in our state to share with our people. So what happened? Now, people could argue about this, but I will tell you that I believe we had far more people get vaccinated because I just shared exactly what we were experiencing. And I'll tell you, I look back at some of those early reports, and I sometimes shudder a little bit because we learned so much, which is what happens with science during one of these crises. You learn as you go. There were times, as you know, that we didn't have the right recommendations on masks. And we, of course, could debate that in this room, I'm sure. But we gave our best scientific data and our best experiential data. And that's how you talk to people. And yes, you never tell people that they are not valued, and you never just dismiss their stories. And I'm positive I or others have been guilty of that in the moment, and we shouldn't be. But we also should not demonize one another. And when we, in my family, ultimately had protesters, which did, to a large degree, cross some lines, when some people were just communicating with me, other people, I have to be honest with you, some people wrote swastikas on signs that were next to my home. Certainly, my father's Judaism had nothing to do with my COVID response. But I can tell you that sometimes because people were traumatized, and I understood how scared they were, and I understood what they were hearing out there, but that's how you talk to people. And if we do that, after not, and I have to be honest about this, if we don't systematic health system, we'll be okay. We will find common ground, even though I suspect that there are some pretty significant differences between me and some of the other testifiers on what we would do with the next pandemic. We would actually be able to still move forward together.
Yeah, I mean, I think, something you said earlier I thought stuck out to me, the sense of that, no one should be ignored. I think that's a principle I hope everyone here can agree upon, that I think they always have space for more transparency. But also just keeping in mind that broader context. I mean, as you're saying, here are the challenges that we're facing when it comes to this system and how we can work on it. And certainly, I can imagine your experience, whether on addressing COVID or in Samoa, certainly that becomes more difficult to fully enact this monitor, identify, and the transparency report. When you're in the middle of a crisis, when you're in the middle of the chaos, that's something I think we can try to do to improve. To the point that was raised, says like this is a reason why we need to invest in capacity, invest in personnel, people working in our government to do this, and as opposed to cutting back on staff and trying to say that we need simultaneously more transparency when that becomes all the more difficult. But I mean, look, I understand, and I've had people in my life that have been ignored and not believed, whether that's my time as a diplomat before, and people I know struggling with Havana syndrome, and people telling them, I don't believe you, and other issues that are out there. But we should always have that system in place. And that's what I just hope we can come back to. I mean, I get it. I'm new on this committee, and I understand it. I'm seeing, years worth of back and forth that are coming here. But as someone who's coming with some fresh eyes, I hope that we can try to cultivate that sense of trust that I know has been so deeply wounded, because I worry about what comes next. I worry about how we deal with the next diseases, the next pandemics, how we try to move forward and understand how this technology of mRNA and others try to move forward on. So I just appreciate, being able to hear this all and try to figure out how best I can be able to relate to the people in New Jersey, around this country, about the safety of the COVID vaccines that I have seen be able to save lives, but also be able to assure that we won't ignore people if they have other concerns, and we do our best to be and to be careful of accusations of personal malfeasance, especially with some of our public servants, in terms of whether or not they were intentionally withholding information or not. We need to be very careful about those accusations on this committee. And with that, I'll yield back.
I will say, we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg here, and you will see more evidence, trust me. Senator Marino.
Well, first of all, thank you, Chairman, for putting on this hearing. I'm going to focus on, let's just stick to COVID-19 and COVID-19 policies. Let's not get into this conversation about vaccines writ large. Dr. McCullough, do you feel that you were listened to in 2021? Did you feel ignored?
Our November 19th, 2020 hearing, done for Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, was very lightly attended by our senators who are working for us. That's a disappointment. There's disappointment. Our hearing was actively suppressed, scrubbed off YouTube.
So just to clarify, not only were your viewpoints ignored, you were called a conspiracy theorist, a spreader of misinformation, somebody who didn't know what they were doing, by people who didn't even take a science class in high school. And yet you're a doctor and you were completely ignored. Let me ask you, Dr. Vaughn, real quick question. Under the age of 5 years old died of COVID?
So very, very few. Actually, theoretically, a healthy child under 5, there wasn't any.
So it's basically zero?
Yes, it's
How about under
statistically
the
zero.
age of 10?
It's still statistically zero.
15?
When you get up
15?
into the 15, 16, I mean there is some.
So under 15, none?
Yeah.
Pretty much, none?
Statistically, yes.
All right, so I'm confused because Governor Green said he held the children who would have died